A girl stands at the threshold of the Tullianum. She's perhaps 14, perhaps 16. The stonework is older than anyone living can remember. The air smells like rot and iron and the memory of fear. A priest of Jupiter stands beside her. He does not touch her. He does not need to. The executioner waits below. She is a virgin. This is not incidental. This is the entire legal mechanism. Roman law forbids the execution of virgins. The penalty for certain crimes demands death. The law creates a problem. The system creates a solution. The solution is rape. This is not a single story. It is a machine. What follows is not about individual cruelty or the sadism of mad emperors. It is about a legal and religious structure that transformed the bodies of young women into instruments of state power. The rape was not a crime. It was a procedure. Death was not the punishment. The rape made the death legal, and it was systematic, documented, and defended by the most respected minds of the Republic and the Empire. The law and the loophole. Roman law held the bodies of virgins as sacred, not because the girl herself was protected, but because virginity held religious weight in a society obsessed with divine favour and ritual purity. The Vestals embodied this. 6 women bound to 30 years of celibacy, tending the eternal flame of Rome. If a virgin faced execution, the law hesitated. Not out of mercy, out of superstition. The Romans believed that killing a virgin invited the wrath of the gods. It violated mos maiorum, the ancestral custom, so the law forbade it outright. No virgin could be strangled, thrown from the Tarpeian rock, or led to the Tullianum for execution. The problem arose when the crime demanded death and the accused was a virgin. Treason, conspiracy, political association with enemies of the state. These charges carried capital sentences. If the condemned was a young woman, and that woman was a virgin, the law collided with itself. The solution was not to pardon her, it was to remove her virginity by force. This was not hidden. Seneca knew of it. Tacitus recorded it. Cassius Dio described it. The act was performed not by criminals but by state functionaries, sometimes the executioner himself, sometimes a designated agent of the court. The rape made the execution legal. The Sejanus purge. Under Tiberius, the Praetorian prefect Sejanus rose to extraordinary power. He commanded the guard. He whispered in the emperor's ear. He cultivated enemies and eliminated rivals with surgical precision. Then, in 31 CE, Tiberius turned on him. Sejanus was arrested, tried for treason, and executed within hours. His body was dragged through the streets. But the purge did not end with him. His children were sentenced to death. His sons were strangled in the Tullianum. His daughter was still a child. Some sources suggest she was under 12. Others say she was in her early teens. She was a virgin. Roman law prohibited her execution. The Senate had already condemned her, so the executioner was given an additional task. According to Tacitus, he raped her before he strangled her. The act was performed inside the prison. No trial, no ceremony. The rape transformed her legal status. She was no longer a virgin. The law no longer protected her. She was killed immediately afterward. The historian who recorded this did not linger on the horror. He mentioned it briefly, then moved on. Not because it was unremarkable, but because within the machinery of Roman justice, it was procedurally sound. The girl's name is not preserved in the sources, the body as legal object. Roman law divided people into categories: citizens and non-citizens, free and enslaved, men and women, virgins and non-virgins. Each category carried different protections, different vulnerabilities, different exposures to violence. A Roman citizen could not be crucified. A slave could be tortured for testimony. A virgin occupied a paradoxical space. She held a kind of negative protection, not because her personhood was valued, but because her body, in its unviolated state, held religious significance. The moment that state was altered, the protection vanished. The law did not see her as a person with rights. It saw her as an object with a condition. The rape did not violate the law. It satisfied it. This logic extended beyond capital punishment. In cases of political conspiracy, entire families could be implicated. His daughters, if unmarried, posed a legal puzzle. If they were virgins, the state could not execute them without offending religious custom. If the state wanted them dead, the virginity had to be removed first. There is no evidence that defendants appealed this procedure, because there was no legal ground to stand on. The rape was not an extrajudicial act. It was the law working as designed. the executioner's duty. The Carnifex was Rome's state executioner. He lived outside the city walls. His profession was considered polluting. He could not enter temples. He was both necessary and despised. His work included flogging, strangling, crucifixion, and in certain cases the preliminary rape of virgin prisoners. This was not assault in the legal sense. It was a mandated act, performed to fulfill a legal requirement before the execution proper. The executioner did not act out of personal desire. He acted as an instrument of the state. The girl's violation was not prosecuted because it was not a crime. It was a procedure. The location varied. Sometimes the Tullianum, sometimes a cell within the Mamertine, sometimes a location determined by the presiding magistrate. The act was not public, but it was not secret either. It appeared in trial records. It was referenced in Senate debates. Afterward, the girl was executed. Strangulation was the most common method. Quick, efficient. The body was disposed of according to custom, sometimes thrown into the Tiber, sometimes left unburied as an additional disgrace. The rape was not mentioned in the public sentence, but those who needed to know knew. The system required it. The question of the Vestals. The Vestal Virgins occupied the most sacred role available to women in Rome. 6 priestesses, chosen as children, bound to 30 years of celibacy. They tended the eternal flame in the Temple of Vesta. They held legal privileges unavailable to other women. They could own property. They could make wills. If they encountered a condemned prisoner on the road to execution, they could grant a pardon. But if a Vestal broke her vow of chastity, the punishment was absolute. She was buried alive. The procedure was ritualized. The guilty Vestal was dressed in funeral garments. She was led in a procession through the forum. She was placed in an underground chamber with a small amount of food and water. The chamber was sealed. She was left to suffocate or starve in darkness. The Romans did not call this execution. They called it immuration, a living entombment. Technically, the state did not kill her. It simply removed her from the world and let the gods decide. But what of the man involved? If a Vestal was accused of breaking her vow, there was usually a lover. He was flogged to death in the forum, publicly, brutally. The double standard was not hidden. It was formalized. The woman was sacred, so her death had to be indirect. The man was not, so his death could be spectacular. Her body mattered because of what it symbolized. His body mattered only as a lesson. The silence in the sources. Roman historians did not dwell on these procedures. Tacitus mentions the rape of Sejanus' daughter in a single subordinate clause. Cassius Dio references similar practices without elaboration. The omission is not accidental. These acts were not scandals, they were routine. The sources go quiet not because the events did not happen, but because they did not require explanation. For a Roman reader, the rape of a virgin before execution was procedurally comprehensible. It resolved a legal contradiction. It satisfied religious custom. The modern reader recoils. The Roman jurist nodded. This tells us something about power. It does not always announce itself with trumpets and blood-stained spectacle. Sometimes it works through paperwork, through legal definitions, through the transformation of bodies into categories and categories into procedures. The girl screaming in the Tullianum was not an anomaly. She was proof the system was working. The mechanics of legitimacy. Rome did not justify the rape of virgins before execution with appeals to sadism. It justified it with appeals to law and piety. The argument went like this. The gods forbid the execution of virgins. The state must execute traitors. Therefore, the virgin must cease to be a virgin before the execution. The rape was not framed as a violation. It was framed as a legal correction, a technical adjustment. This is how power sanitizes itself, not by denying the violence, but by embedding it so deeply into the legal structure that it stops looking like violence at all. It becomes administration, process, necessary procedure. The functionaries who carried out these rapes were not torturers. They were civil servants. The ages of the condemned. The sources rarely specify exact ages, but the word used is telling. Virgo, puella, girl, not woman. The language suggests youth. Some of the condemned were children by any modern standard. Others were adolescents. Girls were married as young as 12 in Rome. Puberty marked the transition to legal and sexual availability. But virginity remained a distinct status. The law cared only about the hymen, not the calendar. If the body had not been penetrated, the body was sacred. If the body was sacred, the state could not kill it without first altering that sacredness. So the alteration was mandated. The younger the girl, the more the procedure offended later sensibilities. But Roman law did not operate on later sensibilities. It operated on its own internal logic, and that logic was satisfied as long as the steps were followed. Rape, then death, in that order. The order mattered, the absence of protest. There is no record of a Roman senator standing in the forum and condemning this practice. No speech from Cicero denouncing the rape of condemned virgins as barbaric. No philosophical treatise from Seneca calling for reform. The silence is evidence, not of ignorance, but of acceptance. This was not hidden. It was simply normal. When Tacitus records the rape of Sejanus' daughter, he does not call it monstrous. He notes it as a legal peculiarity. The Romans who read these accounts did not demand justice for the girls. They understood the system, they participated in it. The machine ran smoothly because no one threw themselves into the gears, what the body became. A virgin's body in Rome was not entirely her own. It belonged to her father under Patria Potestas. It belonged to the gods under religious custom. It belonged to the state under legal jurisdiction. When she was condemned, her body became the site where multiple claims converged. Her body was the mechanism, not the victim in the legal sense, but the instrument through which law, religion, and power resolved their contradictions. The rape was not incidental violence. It was the hinge on which the entire procedure turned. Without it, the execution could not proceed. This is what it means to be objectified in the most literal sense, not metaphorically reduced to an object, but legally transformed into one. The imperial precedent. The practice did not originate with Tiberius. It predated the empire. It extended into the reign of later emperors. Domitian, Nero, Caligula all presided over systems that included this mechanism. But the legal structure remained constant. The emperor did not personally rape the condemned. He did not need to. The system did it for him. He signed the execution order. The functionaries carried it out. The rape was implied in the signature, built into the process. This is how atrocity becomes bureaucratic, not through the madness of a single tyrant, but through the collaboration of thousands of ordinary officials doing their jobs correctly. The end of the practice. The historical record does not mark a clear end to this procedure. As Christianity spread through the empire, attitudes toward the body and virginity shifted. Some sources suggest that by the late empire, the rape of virgins before execution had fallen out of practice, but the evidence is fragmentary. The practice may have simply faded, not because of moral outrage, but because the legal and religious framework that required it weakened. As the old gods lost influence, the prohibition on executing virgins lost force. The cruelty ended not because it was recognized as cruelty, but because it stopped being useful. The machine and the girl. She stands at the threshold. The stone is cold, the priest is silent. Below, the executioner waits. She knows what is coming. Everyone knows. The law demands it. The gods require it. The state has decided. She does not speak. There is no record of her words, no inscription preserving her name. She exists only as a procedural step, a legal object, a body that must be altered so that another law can be satisfied. The gate closes, the world narrows, and the machine runs on. This was not chaos, it was policy. The cruelty was in the routine. The rape was not a deviation from Roman justice. It was Roman justice functioning exactly as designed. Power did not need to be loud. It simply needed to be systematic. The girls are not remembered, but the system that consumed them is. Preserved in legal texts, referenced in histories. We know it happened. We know why it happened. We know that it was not one madman's sadism, but the collective labour of an entire civilization. What remains is not a question of whether it occurred, but what it means that an empire built on law, philosophy, and the claim of civilization required the rape of children to maintain its sense of order. If Rome could build an aqueduct, write the Aeneid, and codify principles of justice that echo into the present, and still mandate this, what does that say about the relationship between culture and cruelty? The answer is not comforting, but it is necessary. Which part of this system would viewers from the present defend if they were transported back? Drop a comment. This is Hidden by Time.